Thorne was a man who understood the language of silence. As one of San Francisco's most sought-after archivists and book restorers, he spent his days in the quiet company of decaying paper and faded ink, coaxing secrets from the past. But the terse phone call about his Aunt Clara's death had pulled him from his climate-controlled world and thrown him into the sun-drenched hypocrisy of Oak Haven Valley, California's elite wine country. He had come to pack up a life, not to unearth a conspiracy. The valley was a sea of emerald green vineyards, punctuated by opulent estates. It was a world of old money and new power, a world where his family, one of the first black families to farm this land, was now just a footnote in a history written by the victors. His aunt's cottage, a small, stubborn outpost of rustic authenticity, sat at the edge of the sprawling Sterling estates, the largest and most prestigious vineyard in the region. The day after he arrived, he received a visit from the patriarch himself. Bartholomew Sterling was a man in his 60s, radiating a lifetime of unchecked authority. Dressed in a crisp white shirt and tailored slacks, he looked less like a farmer and more like a king surveying his domain. "Marcus, my boy," Sterling began, his voice smooth and aged like his finest Cabernet. "Your aunt was a fixture, a part of the valley's charm. To honor her memory, I want to make you a generous offer for this little plot. Let us fold it into our history, preserve it." The offer was fast, clean, and far too generous. It set off a quiet alarm in Marcus's meticulous mind. "I'll need some time to sort through her things, Mr. Sterling," Marcus replied, his tone polite but firm. Sterling's smile was a thin veneer. "Don't take too long. The past, like wine, can sour if left open for too long." It was in a dusty, forgotten steamer trunk in the attic that Marcus found them. Not wine, but 3 leather-bound botanical journals. They belonged to his great-grandfather, Elias Thorne. The pages were filled with exquisite, hand-painted illustrations of grapevines, accompanied by notes on grafting techniques, soil composition, and weather patterns. But Marcus, an expert in old documents, saw more. He saw a scientific mind at work, a man obsessed with creating something unique. Tucked into the margins were strange, cryptic notes about a phoenix vine, a varietal that could supposedly rise from the ashes of any blight. Puzzled, Marcus took the journals to Isabella Reyes, a local historian and the retired curator of the county museum. She was a sharp, shrewd Latina woman in her 50s who had seen the valley's history be rewritten more than once. "Elias Thorne," she said, her eyes lighting up with recognition as she carefully handled the journals. "The official story is he was a failed farmer who sold his land to the Sterlings during the Great Blight of the 1930s. But there were always whispers that he developed a miracle grape. That the Sterlings didn't just buy his land, they bought his silence." As Marcus worked late into the night, carefully restoring the delicate pages, he began to understand. The notes weren't just about farming, they were a code. References to the phases of the moon weren't astrological, they were a calendar. Descriptions of root patterns weren't just botanical, they were a map. His work was interrupted by the roar of a sports car. A young man with his father's arrogant posture and a cruel smile stepped out. "Cole Sterling. My dad sent me to see if you needed help packing," he said, though it sounded like a threat. He eyed the journals on the table. "Old farm logs. Probably not worth much. We can dispose of them for you." Marcus felt a cold dread. They knew. They didn't know what was in the journals, but they knew they were a loose end. That night, Marcus woke to the acrid smell of smoke. A fire had started in his workshop, an electrical fault. He barely managed to save the journals before the fire consumed the small building. It was a clear, brutal message. The past was meant to burn. The fire hadn't scared Marcus off, it had galvanized him. He and Isabella worked feverishly, knowing their time was running out. They realized the map hidden in the journals didn't lead to a vine, but to a place, a hidden cellar beneath an old, abandoned chapel on the Sterling estate, the very chapel his great-grandfather had helped build. It was his, Isabella whispered, her finger tracing the old property lines on a county map. The chapel was on Thorne land before Sterling acquired it. That night, under the cover of a new moon, they drove to a remote edge of the Sterling property. Cutting through the fence, they moved silently through the endless rows of grapevines, the air cold and heavy with the scent of fertile earth. The silence of the vineyard was unnerving, a living thing that seemed to watch their every move. They found the chapel, a dilapidated stone structure overgrown with ivy. A loose flagstone in the floor revealed a set of steep, stone steps leading down into darkness. The air that rose from the cellar was cool and smelled of damp earth and something else. Wine. The cellar was small. At its center was a single, ancient-looking wine barrel. And on top of it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a tin box. Inside was Elias Thorne's final journal, and beneath it, the original, notarized land patent for his 200 acres. The final page of the journal contained the most damning secret, a detailed, scientific breakdown of the phoenix vine's unique genetic markers, a botanical fingerprint that could prove the Sterling's entire empire was built on a stolen legacy. I knew you couldn't resist digging up the dead. Bartholomew Sterling stood at the top of the stairs, flanked by his son Cole, blocking their only exit. The benevolent mask was gone, replaced by a look of cold, reptilian fury. My grandfather made your family, Sterling sneered. He gave you a fair price. You should have taken the money and been grateful. This land patent says he was a thief, Marcus shot back, holding up the document. And this journal says you're still a thief. This vine, the one that made you rich, it's not yours. A cruel smile played on Sterling's lips. Proof is a funny thing, Marcus. It can burn. It can be lost. In a few months, this phoenix vine will be gone. A tragic, unstoppable blight, the news will say. But I'll have my own, genetically patented version ready to take its place. A true Sterling creation. He was admitting to destroying the evidence, to erasing Elias Thorne from history forever. You're right about proof, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. That's why I sent high-resolution scans of the forgeries on your deed, the one my great-grandfather supposedly signed to a friend at the Bureau of Land Management 3 hours ago. I'm a book restorer, Mr. Sterling. I know ink. I know paper. And I know a fake when I see one. Sterling's face went pale. As if on cue, the distant sound of sirens grew louder, slicing through the vineyard's oppressive silence. Cole made a move towards Marcus, but his father stopped him, a look of utter defeat on his face. They were trapped in a cellar of their own making, cornered by the history they had tried to bury. The Sterling Empire, built on stolen roots, collapsed. The land was returned, and the story of Elias Thorne, the brilliant botanist and viticulturist, was finally told. Marcus, the quiet archivist, did not return to the city. He stayed, trading the silence of the library for the rustle of vine leaves in the wind. He had come to close a chapter of his family's past and had instead found the beginning of his own, a new Vintner ready to cultivate his rightful legacy under the warm California sun.